Welcome to Third Phase of Moon. My name's Blake Cousins. Now get ready for the start of an amazing journey. The largest YouTube channel is now on the largest civilian-run radio station, Third Phase of Moon Radio with researchers on a mission. Host Dr. J. Andy Elias and best-selling author, MUFON investigator Preston Dennett are about to take you on all the rides of our lives. We'll be taking UFO news, interviewing top researchers. The journey begins now. Third Phase of Moon Radio is officially on air. Without further ado, here comes Third Phase of Moon, researchers on a mission.
That's right, you heard it. This is Revolution Radio, the world's largest listener-supported station. We welcome you back to Third Phase of Moon Radio. I'm your host, Dr. J, and we have an incredible show for you today. Joining us today for the first time is John Lear. John Lear, as you all know, has been involved in ufology for over 25 years. He actually was the person that Bob Lazar first came to the story. There's going to be an incredible new movie about him called The Immaculate Deception, which is produced and directed by Jeremy Kenyon Lockyer Corbell, who is on air. Jeremy, how are you today?
I'm good, Dr. J. How you doing?
Excellent. And speaking of the Immaculate Deception, let's also plug in John's website, which is realjohnlear.com, as well as jilllear.com. That's his daughter's site with some amazing artwork. And speaking of all that, why don't we bring in the man himself, Mr. Lear? How are you?
Dr. J, doing fine. What's going on?
It's a pleasure to have you on. And, you know, now we are actually also joined by the founder of Third Phase of Moon, Blake Cousins, and who I'm going to give the honors of the first question. Blake, welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot, Dr. J, for having us right here at Third Phase of Moon. This is going to be another historic show that we're going to be putting on Third Phase of Moon Radio. And I wanted to thank John Lear for joining us right here at Third Phase. Former CIA pilot. He's broken 18 world speed records, and his dad was the inventor of the Lear jet. Wow. John Lear, let me ask you first, what got you into ufology, and how did you come across Bob Lazar?
Well, I was kind of interested in ufology, but didn't pay much attention to it until 1985, when I was at a reunion of Southeast Asia pilots here in Las Vegas. And one of the guys who I knew over there in Southeast Asia was Greg Wilson, and I asked him where all he'd been, and he mentioned he'd been flying out of Bentwaters, which is a U.S. Air Force base in England, and been flying A-10s. And I said, oh, Bentwaters, that's supposedly where the saucer landed in the Christmas of 1980. He said, no, not supposedly, it did. He said, I didn't get to see it because I was confined to quarters, but I know the guys who did. And so I said, you mean this stuff is real? There really are saucers? He said, yeah. So that's what started me on the search, and I did a lot of driving around the western states because in those days, you know, we didn't have the internet. And ran into all kinds. It seems like everything fell into place. Everything I went to, I got more information, and then in 1987, a guy called and he wanted a copy of all my stuff, and I said, well, you know, my wife is kind of irritated all the calls I'm getting, so I've kind of discontinued everything. He said, well, if you ever get around to it, you know, I'd like a copy. If you do, I'm an appraiser, and I'll appraise your house for free or for trade. And so I said, great. So he came over, and the guy that was holding the measuring tape was his friend, Bob Lazar. And so Gene Huff and I, the appraiser, are talking about saucers, and Bob Lazar is rolling his eyes. He said, look, guys, he said, I worked at Los Alamos National Laboratories, and if there had been anything to this, I would have known. And so that was the summer of 87, and no, it was in 88. And during the next 4 months, we gave him enough information that intrigued him, and he had left the scientific world, but he decided to re-enter, and he called his friend Dr. Teller, who was the father of the H-bomb, who he knew from Los Alamos, and said, I'd like to get back to work in the scientific world. And so Teller said, do you want to work with me here at Lawrence Livermore, Bob, or do you want to work there in Nevada? And Bob said, I want to work at Area 51. So after that, Bob got 3 technical interviews, and I guess he aced them all, because the next thing I knew was on December 6th of 1988, he came to my house and he sat down, and he always did, in the evening, and I said, "What's going on?" He said, "I saw a disc today." I said, "What?" And he said, "I saw a disc." And I said, "Theirs or ours?" He said, "Theirs." I said, "Oh my God, you went to Groom Lake?" He said, "Yep." And I said, "Well, why don't you, why come over here? They followed you." I said, "Why don't you find out what's going on and then tell me what you found out?" He said, "No," he said, "you've taken so much jazz over all of this flying saucer stuff that I want to tell you it's true. I touched it, I was in it, and it's real, and it is extraterrestrial." So that started the whole thing with Bob Lazar.
I got a question for you. When Bob Lazar went to work at EG&G, which obviously took him from McCarran Airport to Janet Airlines to Area 51, and then the bus drove him to S4, when he was interviewed for his job, wasn't he asked about his association with you?
Yeah. That was the second interview, and they said the first question was, "Do you know John Lear, and what is your opinion of him?" And he said, "I know John Lear, but I think he sticks his nose in places where it doesn't belong." And when Bob told me that, he said, "What I didn't tell them was that I also like to stick my nose into places it doesn't belong."
Good answer. Blake?
Yeah, we just released a video about 48 minutes ago on Third Phase of Moon breaking news. And I wanted to ask you, Mr. Lear, if Bob Lazar spoke of other kinds of objects or reverse-engineered flying craft alien technology, because what we just broke is 2 jetliners escorting a massive UFO over Yingling, China. I'm not sure if you're aware of this. It was breaking news. It's been out for 24 hours, and it's on Google Maps, and it's an incredible image of 2 major jetliners escorting a plasmic kind of energy kind of orb. Is there anything that Bob Lazar said besides the saucers? Was there any other kind of technology that they're using?
No, he just he talked about he was given briefings in a way of they were pamphlets, anywhere from 5 or 10 pages to 50 pages, and I guess there was about 40 or 50 of them, and he was put in a room, and he was told to read those briefings, and this was more or less to bring him up to speed about what they had uncovered up till then. And these briefings were stapled about halfway through, and as his clearance was raised, the staples would be moved further back as he became eligible for more information.
Now, isn't it true that they compartmentalize everything? And that's why I was wondering why an engineer like Bob Lazar would be given access to everything from the autopsy photographs to the fact that the ETs possibly created us, to the fact that they had 63 or 65 external corrections and so on and so forth?
Yeah, well, the compartmentalization is true, and they do compartmentalize everything, which is why we don't make very much progress. But his clearance was going to be majestic, and that's the top. So he would be aware of quite a lot, not everything, but more than anybody else below him.
Bob Lazar's kind of been out of the limelight over the past decade or so. I don't really see anything new on him. There's basically old film, 60 millimeter film of him. There's nothing to present day. Where's Bob Lazar now, and why didn't he come out and speak more publicly about his work at Area 51?
Because he said all he had to say, it was true. He works in Laingsburg, Michigan. He has a company called UnitedNuclear.com. He sells scientific equipment to universities and schools and scientific companies all over the world, and he just stays pretty much to himself. He's told me that, when all's said and done, he wished he hadn't come out because he would like to be at the top of the information world and know a lot more. But one of the reasons that he didn't go back after he and I and a couple others were caught watching the saucers was the fact that when he got on the airplane on the red and white 737 at McCarran to go to Groom Lake, he could remember getting on the airplane and he could remember getting off when he came back to McCarran, but he couldn't remember anything else. So they have a mind control system that is fantastic, that you can't remember anything that you worked on. But more than that, it doesn't bother you. You don't go home and say, geez, I wonder what I did today, which was a problem before in the years before. But now they develop mind control to the point where you don't even remember what you did, and it doesn't bother you.
What's the most shocking revelation that you got from Bob Lazar, from everything that he told you? I know he told you about what the crafts are powered and the fact that he saw an ET through a window, but what do you think was the most startling thing that you heard?
You know, I haven't thought about that, but the most, I guess, I knew pretty much everything, or heard about everything. The most shocking thing, it was true, that, you know, everything was true. But one night in January of 1989, he came into my den, and usually what you did at night, and he's talking, and he gave me the high sign, which means let's go out in the back. I have a stable and some acreage out in the back, and we didn't talk about secret things in my room because we knew it was bugged. So we went out in the back. We walked by the pool, and my wife was out there doing something. She's always suspicious of us, and she says, "Where are you guys going?" And we said, "Oh, we're just going to go out in the back, see something." So we went out in the back alleyway there, and he was just really excited. I said, "What?" He said, "John, you will never know what it's like to see your first alien." I said, "You saw him?" And he said, "Yep." And I said, "Couldn't have been a doll, couldn't have been a monkey, couldn't have been a fake anything?" "Nope." He said, "I saw it. I was being escorted by two military police along this corridor, and through this door there was a 12 by 12 inch window, and I looked through that, and there was two scientists in lab coats facing me, and a gray about 3.5, 4 feet tall facing them." He said, "No possibility it was a fake." Now, since then, of course, he said that I'm making it up. But I saw him once in Albuquerque about 3 or 4 years, no, more than that, five or 6 years ago. And we're just talking away, and I said, "Are you sure you don't remember?" And he said, "Yeah, I remember." So that confession to me was kind of neat.
So he's going back and forth on his statements?
Pardon?
So is he going back and forth on his statements?
Yeah,
he said
he doesn't want to mention. He doesn't want to mention that he saw a real alien because he's taken so much flack over just seeing a flying saucer. People aren't ready for that, and to actually say that he saw a real live alien is much more shocking to the public. So he didn't want to say that, and he doesn't like me talking about it, but. So much
we did a show with Ron Gardner. He explained to us also about Dan Bursch, who said that he worked in Area 51 as well, and he knew all about the J-Rod. Is this the same alien that Lazar saw? Is this J-Rod?
No, the J-Rod is something the government faked to make a simile, something that they could control, and say that this was actually the somebody from the future who somehow came back in time and needed our scientists to help fix him for whatever was wrong with his civilization, and then he left somehow. They went over to Egypt and went to the pyramids, and somehow he disappeared in a flash of light. No, I'm not buying the J-Rod story.
Did you hear about any other extraterrestrials or a different species from Bob Lazar other than the Greys?
Did I hear? No, I don't think so. I think the Greys are the only ones that he talked about.
What other races do you know about that have visited Earth?
Well, there's the government 20 years ago knew about 57 different races that were visiting Earth. There's 8 races that work up at Area 51. That's information that was 20 years old, so there's probably more now. Unbeknownst to the public, our universe wasn't the result of a Big Bang, and it wasn't born 17 billion years ago. It was infinite. It's infinite. So is our lifetime. When we're born, we're given a soul. That's forever. It never goes away. We may pass away from this lifetime, but we'll go on to the next one, and it goes on forever and ever. So the universe is infinite.
Absolutely, I think it's basically it'll never end. There's nothing behind it. We have no idea how alone or not alone we are on this earth because it's so massive. It just doesn't. It's beyond comprehension. But I wanted to ask you about you've flown over 150 aircraft and you're certified by the Federal Aviation. You had a certificate granted from the Federal Aviation Administration. Was there any kind of protocol when you're flying for the CIA if you're ever to come across a UFO, and where would you report it to?
No, there's no protocol. I never saw anything while I was working for them. My work was in Southeast Asia, the Middle East, Africa. In those days, I was busy flying the airplane, and that was way before I became interested in UFOs, which was in 1985. The work I did with them was between 1967 and 1970 when I ferried airplanes to Vietnam, Republic of Vietnam, the forward air control airplanes that were built in Wichita. And then in 72, 73, I flew in Laos for a cutout company, Continental Air Services, Inc., which was did the same kind of work as Air America. And then later in 77, did some work in Somalia. And then in 1982, 83, I did some work in Egypt. But I wasn't interested in anything, never saw anything in those days. Actually, I did see something in 1966 when I was flying a Lear jet. I was descending into L.A., and I saw something pass me during my descent, and it went from the left side of the airplane below me to above me and to the right side of the airplane, and it looked exactly like what they call the flying bathtub, which was the M2F2, which was, if you remember, the $6 million man. That was the airplane that he supposedly crashed in. And that's what I thought I saw, but only later, when I became interested in UFOs, did I realize how ridiculous it was to have seen a highly technical airplane like that going through the approach corridor for Los Angeles. So that was definitely a UFO.
Several years ago, when Art Bell was still a host of Coast to Coast, you did the ET briefing, and in there you mentioned, among other things, that the small grays are glorified robots, if you will, and you also mentioned that the Cold War was manufactured for the secret, to keep the secrecy. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I think the Cold War was manufactured because in end of the World War II, it became evident that there was extraterrestrials. They had recovered several craft. Most people think Roswell is the first recovery, but the first recovery was 1941 in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, and there was probably some before that. But they knew what was going on, and in order to keep the public, they thought it was so serious. In order to keep the public focused on something else, they manufactured a war between us and Russia. And you'll notice that everything that happened in space was divvied up. The Russians didn't go to the moon; they went to Venus. We split up the duties of going, and of course, they didn't go to the moon. We didn't go to the moon either. That was all a hoax, not a hoax, a scam. There's no possible way that we could have gone to the moon, but they got away with it, and it's been a secret for, 40 years now, and that's the way it went. So as far as
we just also posted, what about the video from China when China just landed their rover on the moon? Is that, you look at the ground on the surface, it's like dark dirt, like regular dirt right here on Earth, and that looks real. And then the NASA videos, they come out, it almost looks like a Hollywood stage. Did China make it to the moon?
I doubt it, because what China is using is old NASA pictures, and they don't have any new pictures of their own, and also they aren't in any format. They're just they're kind of split diagonal photos that looks like they were cut from something else. So yeah, we couldn't have gone there.
You know, we're coming to our first break in a couple minutes, but we still got a couple minutes. I wanted to ask you about Venus. I know you said that it's supposed to, apparently, the NASA tells us that the temperature is too hot for any life, but you mentioned that the parachute didn't melt, so therefore it's lying. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, we're told that the temperature of a planet is directly proportional to the distance from the sun. That's not true. The sun emits an electromagnetic wave, and the atmosphere of each planet is what modifies that wave to regulate the temperature on the surface of the planet. For instance, Mercury is very close to the sun, and we're told it's hot enough to melt lead. It's not. It's the same temperature as Earth. We're told that Pluto is so far away that you could have icebergs there and nothing else, but that's not true. It has the same temperature of Earth because the temperature of the planet is modified by the atmosphere, modifying the electromagnetic wave that comes from the sun.
We're just putting out more videos today, as a matter of fact, about Mars and the curiosity of anomalies captured within the photographs in this billion-pixel NASA montage that they put out. And they're putting out, it looks like there's a bird flying on Mars. We don't know what's going on, but it's very suspicious. We just posted that video up just a few minutes ago. But I also wanted to ask you if you were aware of Bill Dana. You know, he's 83. He flew the X-15 rocket. He was going faster than a speeding bullet. He died at 83 today, and he also worked for NASA. Did you ever come across Bill Dana and talk about his beliefs in UFOs?
No, I sure didn't. I didn't have a chance to get with any of the astronauts. I've heard what they've had to say, but of course this mind control thing is why the astronauts are so sure that they went to the moon. And I don't know how the mind control works, but it works very, very well. They really believe they went there, but there's no possibility they did. First of all, the gravity on the moon is not 1/6 of Earth. It's 70% of Earth. And if it was 70%, there's no way we could have had enough fuel to go to the moon, take off, and come back. The civilization on the moon numbers 250 million people, just like us, but they're not from Earth. They're from someplace else.
Everybody stay tuned. We'll be right back with John Lear and Jeremy Corbell in a couple short minutes. Back with filmmaker and director Jeremy Kenyon Lockyer Corbell, and of course, who's making the movie on John Lear, Immaculate Deception. Right before we went to break, caller said that, talking about the moon, several of the guests we've had in the past have said that they believe we went to the moon, and when we got there, that ETs scared us off, and when they saw discs on there and bases on there. What do you know about that?
That's a cover story that NASA released. They want to make us for sure believe that we went to the moon because it was, it's supposed to be a technological achievement, and that we were able to do that, but we weren't. There's too much radiation around the Earth. There's a gravity on the moon. It's 70% that of Earth's. There's an atmosphere there, a breathable atmosphere. There's all kinds of things that would tell somebody that we weren't able to make it. For the people who are really interested, I tell them to pick up a book written by Perry Spalter. That's S-P-O-L-T-E-R, Perry Spalter. And the book is called The Gravitational Force of the Sun. And it completely debunks Newton's universal gravitational force and explains what it really is. And the gravitational force has nothing to do with the density or size of matter. It has to do with the distance from the sun and the area swept going around the sun. And this is Kepler's third law. And if you read Perry Spalter's book, you'll understand that that Newton was wrong, and that the the gravitational force on the moon could very well be 70%. Perry worked for me doing the mathematics without using Newton's law, using the Bullialdus law of inverse square, and she says that based using the three planets, or the three objects, the Earth, the Moon, and the Sun, that the gravitational force when Apollo 11 landed on July 20th, 1969, was 68% that of Earth. So I want to make it clear that Perry Spalter doesn't believe me that that 68% is good for the entire surface of the moon. She doesn't believe that, but I do. And I get my information from Howard Menger. Howard Menger went to the moon in 1956. He wrote a book about it and told about being picked up around Los Angeles somewhere and being taken for 2 weeks that he spent on the moon. He says that the daytime color of the sky is a saffron yellow, and I have that saffron yellow on the some of the moon pictures I have on Pegasus Research Consortium and also the livingmoon.com.
Jose Escamilla has been working on the moon and been there. He's hooked up with a guy, I forgot his name, but he has a Celestron telescope, and obviously you could see atmosphere, different colors of the moon, and it's not gray by any means. And we've also spoken with an astronaut, thanks to Dr. J for hooking up the incredible historic interview we did with Mr. Edgar Mitchell, the third mission to the moon, and he claims that he went to the moon and back, but he also believes that there are bases on the far side of the moon. So what do you think about that?
Well, there's not bases, there's cities all over the moon. I've got pictures all over my wall of pictures on the near side. There's a city plainly visible 125 miles northwest of Copernicus. There's one in the Damaso craters. I mean, they're all over the place if you take the time to look. Now, you aren't going to find them looking with a Celestron telescope, even if you have 21 inches. What you're going to do is have to look at the pictures that were taken by the Lunar Observer satellites that went up between 1965 and 1967. And they were published by NASA before they knew how many cities were up there. And they didn't do a real careful job of airbrushing all the cities. So we can see them by then. As far as seeing an atmosphere with a Celestron scope, you're not going to see it because the atmosphere is maybe a mile or two above the surface, and you're just not going to see it, that kind of atmosphere with a Celestron scope.
Aside from the moon, where else do you think in our solar system is habited?
Every single planet that's in our solar system, and there's 40 different planets. We're only told about 9. The NASA knows of about a few more, but they're not ready to tell us about all the ones that there are. Every single one of the 40 and their moons has civilizations. Our solar system is chock full of civilizations. Some of the people there look like us, some don't. The Sasquatch, the Bigfoot, comes from Mars. And whatever I don't know what they're doing here, but that's where they come from. Venus has billions of people there. So does Saturn, so does Neptune, so does Uranus. All of them have civilizations. But for whatever reason, we're kept in the dark and not told about any of that.
You mentioned earlier in the show that there's these NASA brainwashing techniques to compartmentalize the astronauts' brains so they're trained not to reveal that their mission to the moon was a fraud. Do you know how they go about some of these techniques? What are these ways of doing to programming? How does this programming work?
Well, it came from the Nazi Germany at the end of World War II. We let 3,000 SS and scientists in, and that was Project Paperclip, and that was managed by Alan Dulles, head of the CIA, John Foster Dulles, his brother, who was Secretary of State, and Eleanor Dulles, who was head of the Berlin desk for the U.S., and they brought in 3,000 of those people, and the first thing they did was take over NACA, NACA, which became NASA, and they ran the entire program. They probably still do, but they brought with them the techniques of mind control that they had worked on, and completely made them much, much better. Now, they came over in 49, 50, and so they would have had, let's see, 50, 60, 70, 80. They would have had 40, 50 years to improve that mind control technique. And it was certainly clear when Bob told me about not remembering about his entire work at S4 for those two times he went up there, the last two times he went up there, that they have really have made progress in the mind control.
You know, it is my firm belief that because of all this talk after Bob Lazar came forward about Area 51, that things are no longer kept there because it's public knowledge. And obviously there's got to be new secret bases. And I've heard you say Dulce, and there was a firefight, of course, which I'm hoping you could talk about, and Sandia. Can you talk about those?
Sure. There, back 20 years ago, there was 32 air access only bases. Air access only means you can't drive there, or the only way you can get in there is by air, and that's how they take care of the security. But the ones that I know about now are, one was built when Area 51 was built, but kept more secret. It's 40 miles south of Wendover, Utah, in Nevada, and it's just to the east of Highway 93 or 95 as it goes up to the border there. And it's hidden by holograms, and holograms are used to project scenery or something to hide whatever they want to hide. Now, Sandia is halfway between Tonopah Test Range and Groom Lake, and it started in 1980. Building it, and they took off half the mountain there on the Paiute Mesa and put the base inside, and then put the rest of the mountaintop on there. And that's where the laboratories and all their offices and stuff are. Then about 20 miles north of that, right out in the desert, is where they have their new runways. They have two parallel runways with a huge long hangar in between them, so that they can operate secret programs without everybody seeing what's going on. In other words, on the east side of the hangars, they can use that runway and keep it classified from anybody on the other side of the airfield. So Sandia was operational in 1985. They had to figure out a way to get 2,000 or 3,000 people to work every day, and they couldn't get more airplanes because people would be suspicious of why they needed more airplanes, and they couldn't use buses or cars because it took too long to get up there. So what they did is they built an underground high-speed train, which has its terminus at McCarran Field. You walk over to underneath the Luxor casino, and there's a secret elevator that takes you down to the train. You get on there, and it makes one stop at the Bellagio, and people get on at Bellagio, the people that work at Sandia, and then they go direct to Sandia from the Bellagio. Now, in 2004, they were making an additional track to this secret train, and they accidentally hit the power grid for Bellagio and knocked the power out for 3 days. Well, this is unheard of because casinos have to have backup power because there's so much money rolling around. But for some reason, they had no power for 3 days. They had to send all their guests to other hotels, and then they had to keep it a secret what happened. They had to make accidental disclosure forms for all the people from Nevada Energy to help work on it, because of course Nevada Energy wouldn't have known anything about this, but they would have had to be there to help repair the system because they hit the main grid, power grid for Bellagio.
That sounds like one of the biggest massive cover-ups around, to go to every single casino in Nevada and say, hey, look, you're going to sign this non-disclosure agreement and not talk about it.
We have an unidentified flying object.